almost impossible for me to do this. Welcome, everybody. If you're on YouTube watching this, welcome to the Rabbi Interviews. It is a pleasure to see all of you. I'm going to do the introductions again because I never know exactly when it starts. Welcome, everyone, to the Rabbi Interviews. For those of you who are visiting on YouTube, and of course, anyone who wants to come in on Zoom, it's a pleasure to interview this week a wonderful member of our community who has received recently an incredible honor. We'll talk about that a little bit later. If you're wondering what it is, it's a new fellow of the Royal Society of Arts. But we're going to talk a little bit about her life and how she came to this community. So everyone, welcome to Dr. Marla Morris. So thrilled to have you here. And if you don't know Marla or Dr. Morris, depending on your relationship with her, she, of course, is a wonderful member of the community, studied at Tulane. She is currently both a professor at Georgia Southern, and she is a chaplain at the Memorial University Medical Center. She studied also at LSU, Loyola, and at Carnegie Mellon. So all four, of course, are very impressive. She went to Mission Bay Senior High, and she's also a wonderful human being, just to add that on. So welcome. Should we call you Dr. Morris for this? Or
you can call me Marla.
Marla, so call you Marla. Well, welcome Marla on. And again, it's such an honor to be able to interview you. Again, I haven't seen you in a while in person, unfortunately, as is the case with pretty much everyone else. And we know you were especially on the front lines because you're a chaplain at Memorial. And I know there's just COVID is everywhere there, unfortunately, along with whatever your usual duties would be. So welcome. So again, so let's first ask a little bit about where are you from originally? Where were you born and raised?
I am from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And I grew up in, well, my grandparents were actually Orthodox. But my parents, who were both deceased, were pretty much nothing, mostly Reformed, but they were not really anything. And I'm Reformed, and I've been a member of this congregation for some time. I don't know how many years, but I've been in Savannah for 20 years. I've been teaching at Georgia Southern for 20 years.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
So you're born and raised in Pittsburgh area. Mm-hmm. So that's where you go to high school.
No, I went to high school in California.
That's okay. That's why I got confused there. So you were raised in Pittsburgh. Then when did you move to California?
1978.
Okay. So, and then where in California did you go to, by the way?
We moved. I lived in two different places. I lived in a little town called Escondido, and then we moved to San Diego, and I went to Mission Bay High School. And then from there, we moved to Texas. And then from there, I moved around a lot. From there, I went to Carnegie Mellon for 2 years. I went back home for 2 years, actually.
Yeah, we see that you went to colleges in Louisiana, which would think you're there, but you also college in Pittsburgh, right. Carnegie Mellon, obviously. So you've been to a lot of places, which is nice.
Yeah.
But you went to 3 universities in Louisiana. Yeah. So most people would think you would be from there, but you're not.
No, I lived in New Orleans for 17 years because my father lived there. My parents were divorced. And that's where I got most of my education. I went to Tulane, I went to Loyola, which is right next door. And then I got my PhD at LSU. And then I got the job here 20 years ago at Georgia Southern.
Okay. And those are all great. Of course, I'm from Texas next door, so I know a lot of people go to those schools, especially Tulane. And it's a really great education. Mm-hmm. So what did you want to do when you grew up, when you were younger? Were you always planning to go into this field, or were you?
No. My life went pretty much totally wrong.
Okay. And we're glad to talk to you about it. Let's bring up all the wrong things you taught.
Therapy time to you.
That's right. Let's just start with the deepest, darkest issues and secrets you have.
Yes, my life was I was a total failure in my life. So this is one of those, pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. Hey, look at me now stories. But no, I went to Carnegie Mellon because I was studying to be a concert pianist.
Really?
Yes, and I am a pianist, and I have given performances here in Savannah and some in New York. But I just music school and me, like we just didn't get along. I just didn't, I don't know. It was not the right thing for me. Too much, I guess, anxiety on the stage or something. I mean, and then I figured, I just wasn't of the top 1%. When you're a classical pianist, the only way to make it really is if you're, you know, who makes it in that
Yeah.
world? Like nobody. And then I got injured. Um, I hurt my arm, and I didn't play for, oh my goodness, maybe 15 years. I had to give up my whole career. That's when I moved to New Orleans, and I had to redo my whole life.
And that's for
So
being on the top. I mean, Carnegie Mellon is a pretty impressive school. So you must have been, I don't know if you're top 1%, but you must have
well,
been pretty good.
yeah, but if you're not going to Juilliard, you're nobody in that
Okay.
world. Carnegie Mellon's a great school, but you really have to go to Juilliard or Curtis. I mean, it's the pecking orders. I just wasn't good enough. I knew I wasn't good enough.
Well, it's great that you went into a field you're doing so well. So you went to Louisiana. What did you start studying there?
Well, it's a long story, and I'll make it short. But I had no money. I was working, working class jobs, and I didn't know what I was going to do. And I met these people from Tulane who worked at the Tulane Police Department. And I learned that if you worked for Tulane, they would pay for 2 classes a semester for an undergraduate degree. And I'm like, oh, that sounds like a great deal. So I did. I worked for the Tulane Police Department as a dispatcher for 8 years. They put me through school. They paid for my education.
Wow, that is amazing because Tulane is, I mean, all schools, it's a private school, so it's really expensive.
Oh yeah.
Not more than any other private school, but they're all very expensive. So that is amazing that you were able to do that.
Well, they gave me that gift, and I'm forever, forever, ever grateful. And I worked the night shift for 8 years, and I was able to study and do my job at the same time. So
That's incredible. Have you talked to my kids about that? Well, of course, my son's not ready to go to school, college yet. He's about a year away. He's only a year and a half. So in about 2.5, we'll start talking about colleges. So what did you study at Tulane then?
So at Tulane, I had no plans because my life was ruined, and I thought basically it was over because I couldn't. I was basically practicing the piano since I was 8 years old.
Right.
So I just started taking classes, and I really didn't have a plan. And I started taking classes in philosophy, and I'm like, oh,
Really?
I love this. This is great. And I became a philosophy major. I just kept adding on to classes, and I'm like, oh, I guess I'm a philosophy major now. So I got a degree in philosophy from
And
Tulane.
you went from one of the hardest fields, which is music, specifically piano, to another very difficult field, philosophy. And
Yeah.
so, that's a pretty impressive thing. And so you got your degree in philosophy.
Yep.
Did you go right to grad school afterwards, or
Yes, and then I went next door to Loyola, and this is another amazing story. I had no money once again, and Loyola is another expensive school, and I didn't know how to get a master's degree without money. So a friend of mine said, "Why don't you go over to the religious studies department?" I'm like, "Well, I don't know anything about that." Again, it's like no plans. So I went over there and I talked to the chair of the department. His name was Father Steve Duffy, and the religious studies program, it's a Catholic school, so it was a mostly Christian theology program. I'm like, boy, I sure don't belong here, but it sounds kind of interesting and sort of related to philosophy. And well, okay, well, maybe this will be interesting. So I interviewed with Father Duffy to get into the program because I really didn't know what I wanted to do. And he said, well, what did you major in at Tulane? I said, philosophy. He said, oh, I'll be right back. And he said, he looked at my transcripts and he said, we're going to give you a full ride for your master's program. And I'm like, oh, I'll take it. And I'm like the only Jewish person in the program. Everybody else is there studying to be monks and priests and whatever. Because, there's a monastery in New Orleans. And I loved the program and I learned a lot. which is part of the reason why I became a chaplain. I have a master's degree. It's not in divinity, but it's an academic degree in religious studies. So I really loved that program a lot. I learned a lot. Um, um, and then, it was like, I'm an outsider all the time, and I kind of actually like being on the outside looking in. It's like kind of living in, teaching it in Statesboro, where like, it's not Pittsburgh, you know what I'm saying? And in some ways, I do my best work when I can be on the edge of things, So I think this whole move has worked out. And then when I went to LSU, it was another, wasn't planned. It was not planned at all.
Is that for your PhD?
That was for my PhD. And I had no idea, again, no plans. I didn't know what I was going to do. And I kept trying to get into these PhD programs for theology, but I just couldn't get in anywhere. And then I met a friend of a professor at Tulane, and he said, I'm giving a paper at Claremont Graduate School in California. And he said, I know you did your master's degree in religious studies. Would you do your thesis on there? And I said, oh, on John Cobb and David Griffin. He said, well, that's kind of strange because I'm going to meet them. Can I read your master's thesis? It's a funny story. I'm like, yeah, sure. And at that point, I'd kind of like gone, okay, well, that's it. I'm whatever. Okay, fine. Well, he comes back from this conference and he said, do you want to study with me? And I'm like, in what? He said, in education. I'm like, sure, what the hell? I don't even know what that is. I don't have one degree in that field. So there I am at LSU studying for a PhD with one of the most famous people in curriculum studies, the founder of a movement. His name is William F. Piner. I had no idea who he was. I mean, it's total luck, right?
No, it doesn't sound like if you do it, if something like this happens once, it's luck. But when you get free rides all the way through college, that's not luck. It's personality. It's perseverance. It's being in the right place at the right time. And it's not luck if you're there and they don't like you and they don't want you in. It's just happenstance. So you got your PhD. How long did it take to get your PhD? Did you go straight through and like full time?
Yeah. I went full time. And going to a state school isn't a terrible financial crisis. So I worked part time teaching. I was teaching at Loyola part time as an adjunct, and Delgado Community College as an adjunct, and kind of living on red beans and rice, and going to graduate school.
Good times. It was ramen for me.
Yeah, like right, exactly. So then I don't remember. I don't remember how many years. Oh, I have my dissertation.
What did you do your dissertation on?
I'll show you. It's a book. Now, this was my dissertation.
Oh, really? Curriculum Holocaust competing. I can't read that part. Competing sites of memory and representation.
Yeah.
Wow, that's very interesting.
And it's.
Did you get it published right after you finished it, or to take a little bit while left?
I did. I got it published. Bingo, and
that's good. Usually, you have to go back and redo it.
No revisions, nothing. Boom.
Really, I never even heard of that happening. Wow. Usually, with these dissertations, you got to go through and really do a lot of changes before it's for public consumption.
Well, it wasn't written like a dissertation.
Okay, I must not. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, it was written to be a book, basically. So it took me 3 years to write that, and it's still out. I mean, it's still in press, and that really was the foundation of my, research, if you want to call it, agenda.
That's a powerful area.
So you can see how I went from Loyola to this, and because I really felt like, okay, now if I really want to understand my Jewish identity. As much as I didn't want to do this, because who wants to study this? It's too painful. I decided, I felt like it was my ethical responsibility to dig into this material and to leave, an archive from my perspective, my generation, from being a third generation American Jewish person, right? And so my whole work has been about archiving and history and memory. And I haven't done exactly the same thing all the time, but I kind of keep coming back to those, that ethical responsibility of leaving historical memory. Um, so, so that's what I'm doing.
And it is, I mean, it's so true. It's one of the major pieces to all religions, especially Judaism, is you don't remember the past, you're doing repeat it, as we know. And in certain cases, what you studied is so essential for everyone. So I know it's a tough subject, but I'm glad people like you not only studying it, but also teaching it. So you graduate with a PhD a few years after you started the program. And then you looked around. Did you look around the country for positions? Were you looking in specific places or specific?
No, when with a PhD, you got to send stuff out everywhere. So I sent out about 30 applications. I got 2 interviews, and the second interview was here at Georgia Southern, and I got the job.
Excellent.
So, and I've been here ever since. And it's been a very good place for me because, again, I'm on the edge. I can do the kind of research that I want to, and they leave me alone. So,
So what have you been teaching there mostly since you started 20 years ago?
Well, I teach a whole variety of things, but my main focus has been, or the course I love to teach the most is philosophy. We teach philosophy in the doctoral program. So I've come like full circle back to my undergraduate degree. And so a lot of my publications lately, I'd say in the last 4 or 5 years, have been in philosophy journals. So I'm kind of like doing philosophy through the back door.
That's, I think, probably one of the best ways to do it. If you go through the front door, you may not get a job.
Well, that's true because, philosophy departments are in trouble right now with, humanities, and humanities are in trouble. So at any rate, that's what I've been enjoying doing most. And the other thing that I've been doing lately, like in the last 4 or 5 years, is writing about chaplaincy, my experiences over there at the hospital.
Let's go into that. When did you decide to be, because you weren't one right when you arrived in Statesboro. No. So what led you to do that? Because I remember you finishing that up when I was here.
The chaplaincy?
Yeah.
Well, I got, in 2016, I got cancer. I was very, very sick. And I didn't know if I was going to live. I had a really serious, terrible form of cancer. And it was a really earth-shattering, horrible experience. I'm still here. And Memorial saved my life. I mean, it was, I owe them everything. So I'm very grateful. And I just happened to read this article in the newspaper about this chaplaincy program over there. And I'm like, oh, that sounds like an interesting thing to do. So about 2 years later, after I recovered from all that chemotherapy and lost all my hair and all that, I interviewed with Dr. Brian Childs and Reverend Rachel Griner. And I thought, oh God, I'm never going to get into this. What do I know about this? I don't even have the right. I mean, you're supposed to have a master's in divinity. I have a master's in religious studies, and that's academic. And so Dr. Childs said to me in the interview, you sure you want to do this? This is clinical work. You're an academic. I said, yeah, I want to do this. He said, okay. So I went through their program, and I took 2 units of what's called clinical pastoral education, and then they hired me to be a PRN.
That's awesome.
And I was like, I'm honored, really, because it's very difficult work, and another surprising turn in my my life trajectory, because that I never planned. So
that's a rewarding place to be, but we also know it's very difficult, and then you add COVID into it, it makes it even more so. So you're spending 1 day a week there right now, and then you do rounds 1 day a week or 1 day a month? Not rounds.
Well, yeah, I'm on call on Sundays.
On call, sorry, that's what I meant.
Yeah, I'm on call on Sundays because I'm the only Jewish chaplain they have.
Nice.
And so everybody else is in church, right? So I pick up that slack, and I do pretty long shifts, 12-hour shifts on Sundays on call, but it doesn't mean that I'm there 12 hours. I could be, but sometimes it's 10 minutes, sometimes it's 12 hours. It just depends. So yeah, it's very rewarding and very challenging.
Yeah, and we appreciate you doing it. It's we're in an area that does have a significant Jewish population, but it's still very small. So to have a Jewish chaplain is almost unheard of in the
Right.
hospitals.
That's me.
Yeah, once in a while you'll see it at the base, but it's just we're small minority. But we do have a lot of Jews who go to Memorial.
Yeah.
It's it's one of the major hospitals here. So
Yeah.
so thank you for doing that. But obviously, as a chaplain, you have to administer not to just people who are Jewish, but to anybody.
Everybody.
Hmm?
Anybody and everybody. And so that's how we're trained to truly be, interdenominational, non-denominational, whatever, or nothing, or whatever, you know.
And again, I know I'm friends with Reverend Greiner, so she's truly terrific. So you've done. I mean, this again for those who don't know, you live in Statesboro, but you're working in Savannah once a week. So you got to drive your professor in Statesboro. And then I don't know if you sent it to me. I don't remember how I saw it. I think I just saw it on Facebook, maybe, or just reading. I read the article about you becoming the new fellow of the Royal Societies of Arts. And then I looked it up. I was like, holy cow, I know her. That's pretty impressive. I don't think it came from your Facebook page. I think it was somebody else's, or maybe I just saw an article online. And so I thought that was really that's a pretty big honor. So exactly what does that entail? What happened for you to receive it, and what goes on from here?
Right. So like I was telling you, I was publishing in these philosophy journals now, and they're mostly philosophy of education. Okay, so they're people who are in education doing philosophy, and so I've been working with some people in New Zealand. Actually, they're teaching in China right now, but they're from New Zealand. And the journal that I've been publishing in is, I can't remember if it's housed in New Zealand or Australia, or I don't know where. I can't remember. But so two of these scholars, I noticed behind the last letters behind their names were FRSA, and I looked that up and like, holy cow, they're fellows of the Royal Society of Arts. And I'm like, how do you do that? So I looked it up online, and I'm like, okay, so you have to know at least two fellows. Two fellows have to support your nomination. You have to, have them support. You have to write, like a letter, and then they have to. You have to be elected. Okay, so I wrote to them and I said, I put your names down for the fellowship, and they're like, great, that's great. We'll support you. So about, I don't know, 2 weeks later, I got a letter from the Royal Society of Arts saying, congratulations, you're a fellow of the Royal Society now. So you have to be elected by other fellows. And
what does that entail, though? What does that mean for the lay people out here?
Well, being a fellow is, this particular organization dates back to 1754, I believe, and it used to be called the Society for Royal Arts and Commerce. They don't call it that anymore. They call it Royal Society of Arts. But it's basically an organization that does good works around the world. It's global, so they have fellows globally, and they get involved in kind of good works projects. They have a journal, which is I recently published in their journal an article on chaplaincy. So I think becoming a fellow entails them seeing you do good works in the world and having an academic record, or being a philanthropist in business and doing good work. So it ties so nicely into Judaism, because that's how I think about um, what my job is to do good works in the world. And like the word that I like the most is tikkun, picking up the broken pieces of people's lives. And so I think those two things together, that's the reason I was elected fellow. And so it's basically a global organization, and it's this particular one is they have a house in London where they have a library. I'll have access to a library once the pandemic is over. They have catalyst grants. You can get money to do global projects. They do all kinds of good works projects, and I just think it's a great opportunity to do good things globally.
Yeah, and the fact that you're both an academic and a chaplain, so you've got the academia, but also the hands to hands, meeting with people. It's a nice combination to have. Not everybody has the skills to do that. So what are you teaching right now at Georgia Southern?
Let's see, what am I teaching? I teach so many things.
Don't ask me.
I don't know. Teaching three. I'm teaching. Oh, I know. This is actually pretty interesting.
That wasn't supposed to be the stumper, by the way.
Well, I have so many classes, like I can't remember which ones are which, but I'm actually teaching a seminar this semester in critical theory, which is actually work that came out of the Frankfurt School in Germany. And these are mostly all the members of the Frankfurt School were Jewish intellectuals who fled Germany in the 1930s. And some of them came to New York and went to Columbia University or the New School, or some of them were in California. And so I'm teaching, that's the most exciting seminar that I'm teaching. And so it's just very exciting stuff.
That's just a graduate course, right?
Yes, it's a doctoral course.
And do you teach the undergraduates anymore, or is it just?
Oh yeah, I do. We kind of take turns, so I'll do 2 a semester, and then we'll switch off, and I'll do some doctoral courses and some undergraduate courses and so forth. But that's the course I'm most excited about. The other ones are kind of similar, but there's so many books I can't even remember.
And so now that you've been in this area for 20 years at Statesboro, but being in the area, what have you seen that's kind of changed from when you first arrived?
Well, as far as the university goes, it's grown. I mean, when I first came here, the university was 15,000 students. Now we're 30,000.
Wow, doubling! Holy cow!
Because they've we have all these different campuses now. Now we're what used to be Armstrong, and we have a campus in Liberty County, and then the Statesboro campus. So we have really our numbers of students have gone up incredibly, and the campus itself has really grown building wise. They're just putting out new this and that. It's just really growing. So that's a huge difference from when I first came.
I wonder if a lot of that is because of the Hope Scholarship, which is, the attempt to keep Georgia students in the state. So that may be one of the reasons also.
Yeah, that could be part. I mean, they've always had, since I've been here, they've always had the Hope Scholarship, and that's a great program.
Oh, it's been for that long. I thought.
Yeah, it's been around a long time. Yeah.
Well, you know what? We just needed to be around for about 21 more years.
Well, maybe it will be. I mean, it's been here since I've been here.
We'll talk to my wife later if it's going to need to be there longer. But as far as she's told me so far, it doesn't. Just 21 years, and then we're good to go. And so, what have you enjoyed about being a chaplain? Of course, this was a later in life position for you. And what have you enjoyed, and what have been the difficulties of doing it? So different than academia, I imagine.
Yeah. Well, it's a real mixed bag there, because it's seeing a lot. I mean, I'm seeing so much tragedy, especially with COVID. It's just unbelievable suffering. And, it's a very difficult job, because you've got to pick up the pieces and help people pick up the pieces, and yet not say, oh, everything's going to be fine, because it's never going to be fine. So it's amazing to me how, and I just wrote about this in this article, all you have to say to people is tell me your story. They just want someone to listen. You know, they want someone there emotionally for them, spiritually or whatever. Um, because it's just too hard to handle a lot of this stuff, right? So it's rewarding to help people, you know, or to at least to
Oh
think
yeah.
that I do. That part, it's a very very, and every time I walk in to Memorial, I'm like a sigh of relief, like, oh, this is where I belong. I mean, this definitely is this is an awesome honor for me to be doing this.
Yeah.
So
And you're the person who is coming into the room who works for the hospital who's not going to poke or prod or take a temperature. Or, you're just there to be supportive. And so that's probably very appreciative.
right,
They're
yeah,
probably very appreciative most of the time.
yeah, yeah, because the doctors and nurses don't have time. I mean, and they're not trained to do what we do,
Right.
you know. So
Trained with the body and some of the, soul. But for you, it's mostly the soul and the attitude and trying to help them understand how they can get over whatever they're dealing with, or if they can't, then how do you comfort them? It's a difficult thing to do.
yeah,
And
it is.
Memorial
It's
does a pretty good
challenging.
job of it. And so for fun, what do you do for fun? Like our hobbies now, we can also make it like before COVID, what were your hobbies?
Well, I am a musician first and foremost, so now I can play for fun and I don't have to worry about, juries and competitions and all that. So I've kind of branched out. I play guitar, I play um, the fretless bass, I have my piano downstairs. So that's what I do for fun. And it's great because I don't have to be under pressure,
Right, and you don't have to leave the house, which is
and I don't have to leave the house.
been hard for a lot of people now, but of course it's getting a little bit better.
Yeah,
And the campus of Georgia Southern is really pretty, so it's nice that
yeah.
you came in an area which you like. And so when you overcame your cancer, you decided that chaplaincy was a good place for you. Is that something you want to do in the future?
Oh, yeah.
Continue to do it as you stay a professor and kind of
Well,
maintain the
I
balance
don't
between both of
plan
them?
on ever quitting teaching. I'm going to die in the classroom is my goal.
Well, good luck on that.
I mean, I'm not like one of these 30-year people. I'm out of here running away. I'm teaching until I just can't, think anymore. So I don't plan on retiring ever. I don't think that's a good idea for me. So I like to do the chaplaincy once a week, and I don't think I want to do it every day. That's too hard. I just, that's too much. So this is perfect balance right here.
Yeah, and we're kind of in the same boat because, but for different reasons. I had my second kid at 50, and so my retirement plan will be death as well. I can't afford to retire ever again. So it's a whole different reason. So it's nice to find somebody who really enjoys what she's doing. I mean, teaching is such a wonderful thing, and doing it in college, as we know, is just so difficult to get those jobs. So you really have to be excellent to do it. Have you enjoyed the students there? Have you found that they've been interesting, or has the student population changing at all in their attitudes, or has it pretty much been kind of the same, stagnant over the years?
Well, the thing that I like about teaching at a state school is that um, most of the students, the undergraduates, are first generation college students. And so that's a population that, really needs our help. I don't need to be teaching people who, you know, are already smart. They don't need me, right? I'm not saying they're not smart. I should say, I should use the word, that was the wrong word. People who,
Academically capable, maybe?
well, they're not very, uh,
Not used to the system.
I should say they're new to all of this. Okay, they're new to academics. Whereas someone like myself who went to Tulane, I've been reading forever and ever. And these kids, they're all new to this, so they need my help. So I look at teaching as a helping profession. So I'm with the right kinds of students. I like being with first generation college students because they need a mentor. They need a guide. They need someone to introduce them to, different things and ideas and so forth. Um, so that's a good place for me to be. And then my doctoral students are all, most of them are all, have been in the field, have been teachers for 20 years. So they're veteran teachers, and they're
Oh,
coming
really?
back. Yeah, they're coming back to get their doctorates. So yeah.
Is their school system paying for it, or is Georgia Southern paying for it, or they do it themselves?
Well, I don't know. I really don't know how they do the finances. Um, I don't know.
It must be a very different experience to teach kids coming right from high school who are 18, and then teaching
It
people
is.
in their 40s and 50s who've been
Yeah.
teaching for 25 years.
Yeah, it's a whole different, thing. So it's a little difficult to remember when I teach the undergraduates that they're not the doctoral students, right? And to meet, to use the phrase, to meet them where they are, whatever. But so yeah.
Well, that's a pretty exciting thing. So I want to make sure we got all the information we can. So for the Fellow of the Royal Society of Arts, once the pandemic is over or slows down, you're allowed to use this private library and research center in England. And then you're able to publish any of your papers, I guess anything that matches what they need in their
Well,
journals.
yeah. So they have it's called the Journal of the Royal Society of Arts, which is, the patron of the journal is actually the Queen.
Oh, wow.
Yes, and so they have a lot of money, which is
Yes.
great.
Say hi to her next time you're there, by the way.
Right. So yeah, so the journal is, it's kind of like they publish ongoing, and they're interested in current events and good works. It's not a technical, journal for specialists in any particular
Right.
field. So I published my first very short piece in there on chaplaincy, and that's the kind of thing that they're looking for.
So that's great that you found that match.
Yeah, yeah, yep. So hopefully, when this pandemic ends, and I do think we're seeing some light somewhere
Yeah.
at the end of the tunnel with the vaccines, I do plan on going to England and spending time in their library in the Royal House, and meeting some fellows over there, and it's very exciting.
It is. I mean, that's very exciting. Hopefully you'll be able to do it sooner rather than later, but we'll see. Have you been to London before?
Yes, I have. I have.
I think it's one of my favorite cities in Europe and maybe the world. It's just got a nice vibe that I really like.
Mm-hmm.
And so everything's to be good. It's nice to talk to somebody who is so satisfied with her job, with her life at this time. I know it's very difficult during the pandemic, but some positives have come out of it, although it would have been nice to have the positives without the death and the unemployment and the hunger.
Right.
But
right.
side effects, I think, are pretty obvious. And hopefully, as a chaplain, you'll see less and less patients with COVID. And so when you're with the patients of COVID, you're probably gloves on, mask on, robe on, all that.
Yeah. So I do not go into the rooms. They are behind glass, as you see on television. And of course, we have on the proper protective, PPE.
Right.
And so when a family wants to see their loved ones, they can't go on those floors.
Yeah, I know. It's so tough.
It's terrible. So what we do is we use like an iPad, and we use WebEx, and the best we can do is put the iPad up against the window,
Right.
and it's very tragic.
Yeah, it is not a good time to be in the hospital, as we know.
No.
But hopefully things are turning around, as you said. It seems like we're definitely on the right track. So
with the vaccines, I hope
vaccine.
so. I hope so.
Yeah, just gotta make sure everybody gets one and wears masks and all that jazz. And again, it has been an absolute pleasure. I know you have another meeting in a minute or two. It is such a pleasure. Mazel tov for us on this big honor. Thank you for everything you're doing at Georgia Southern. Thank you for everything you're doing at Memorial. Who knows, maybe one of these days you'll teach at the Armstrong campus and we'll do lunch. Hopefully soon. It's hopefully. And if not, we'll do dinner or breakfast. I'm open to all foods. And thank you. So next week, we're going to be interviewing Brian Graves. Why are we interviewing Brian Graves? Besides the fact that he's awesome, he is actually going to be leaving. He bought a streamer, and he's going to take a year or two off just to travel around the country. So unfortunately, he'll no longer be our chef. This will be a way for you to say goodbye to him if you want to join the Zoom, or just to hear a little bit about his life. So thank you again, Dr. Marla Morris, PhD, FRSA. You may be the only one who can say that in this whole county, maybe this part of the state. So that is pretty impressive. And congratulations again.
Thank you.
And you have a meeting with them right now too, right?
Yes, I do.
Very apropos.
I have to get my British accents now.
Yeah. And again, if the Queen's on, just say hi for me and remind her she owes me money from the last, poker game. So.
Okay.